Well, it's my great honor and privilege to have Willem Ratte with us today. Willem is, of course, very well known in Rhodesian military circles and South African military circles. Willem was born in Paarl and grew up in South Africa and ended up in the Special Air Service Regiment after the war, joining the South African Army and in 3-2 Battalion. So, Willem, perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Rhodesia and ended up joining the SAS.
I went to Southwest Africa, which is now Namibia, after I left school, and I had one very unsuccessful year at university. My father thought that I'd make a good lawyer, and I wasn't interested, and I failed all my main subjects, and then had to work off my bursary in north of Southwest for a year. And after that, I stayed there and worked for a farmers agency for quite a few years and enjoyed myself. And and then when I was 25, in the meantime, I went and studied subjects that I liked by mail through UNISA. And when I got my degree, I started teaching in Windhoek. And I suddenly realized, this was in 1973, I realized that all these guys are now going to the army. And I was never in the army. When I left school, they had a system where you were either lucky to go to the army or whichever way you want to see it, or you didn't. And I was one of those who didn't have to go to the army. So I thought, well, I'm now 25. If I don't do it now, I'll be too old. So I decided I'll go and join the army. But the South African army at that stage, 73, there was something going on in the north, but it didn't affect us. There wasn't really a war going on. What Rhodesia was, it was actually getting like a war. And so I went down to my parents for Christmas and didn't tell them anything. I said to them, I'm going to Joburg, which was true, but I didn't tell them that I'm going to carry on further up to Salisbury, because my father was very much against any military service. He'd had this experience in the Second World War, and he didn't like me. He wouldn't have liked me going to the army. So I ended up in Salisbury in the beginning of 74. And ran around trying to find where must I join. And one guy in the ministry said to me, but do you know there's a war going on? I said, yeah, that's why I'm here. And then I had a look. Then eventually I got to KG6 and the recruiting office, and there was a pamphlet there, and it said there's 2 white units, RLI and SAS. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, geez, SAS, I'll never make that. I'd rather go to RLI, which is for normal people like me. And then I joined, and was too late for 136. Well, I was actually in time. I got there on a Friday, and on a Monday, January 74, 136 started. But the great Moose Erasmus said to me, come here, that word starts with a C, and told me that I must wait for the next course, and I became part of the waster squad. We were the regulars that sort of started trickling in. In the end, there was about 36 of us. Yeah, and that was actually, initially I wanted to go AWOL. I thought to myself, no, I didn't come here to bloody waste my time. And but unfortunately I decided to stay. And in the end, there was 36 of us, guys like Rob Beach and other guys. Very nice bunch of blokes. Yeah, and then 137 started. National servicemen came over from Willem, and we started our course. And finished the course, and then I did one bush trip with Key Commander. And some of my mates, like Fanny Schaefer and Jeff van der Weyt and John van Asweer, and they'd gone on selection straight after the recruits course. And I thought, no, I'll never make it. And when I got back from the bush trip, I heard that they'd passed. And it's like doing the recruits course, you get to know each other. I thought to myself, well, if they can make it, I can make it. So I did selection, and that's how I ended up in the Rhodesian SAS. From there, as you know, we had done the training, so it was only certain courses we did, like para course and so on. And the normal procedure, once you've done your para course, you are supposed to get your wings. And that was for a little troopy freshly baked troopie, that was the main goal, to wear the wings and have a beret and belt, the sand beret and the blue belt. And they said to us, no, 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 no. You've got to prove yourself on ops first. So we went on ops for a few weeks and nothing happened. The purple lemon came back. No, you're not going to get the wings yet. Got to do another op. Went on another op, sat on an island for 6 weeks or whatever, and came and watched the lake and nothing happened. Came back. No. In the end, there was so much grumbling and moaning that they decided to send us on a boating course, boating and bushcraft course, split us in half, and one half went to Boomy Hills first on a bushcraft course, and then we shopped around back to Kariba to do the boating course, which was excellent. I mean, it was fun. And then another guy who'd been on the cruise course with me, John Walsh, he I still don't know if it was an accident or deliberate suicide, but he had the rifle between his knees and shot went off and he blew his head away, and that was our first casualty. And I was an innocent little guy. Although I was older than most of the guys, but as far as that's concerned, that was quite a shock to me. And then they said, okay, of course, it's nearly finished anyway, so we got back to Salisbury, and but we still hadn't had our wings. That was our main uh, thing, that we still hadn't had our wings. So went into the barracks room. As I came in, I heard two guys talking, and the one said to the other one, have you heard about John Walsh? So the other one said, yeah, he's got his bloody wings and we're still waiting. So that was my introduction to the army humor.
Army humor,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then eventually, yeah, and then they decided to, because there were no ops. Yeah, there were ops, but they were all lemons. You know, it was a very funny time in the unit. As you said yourself, you went over because there was nothing happening. You went back to Alva, and then in the end they decided to do an all-in. They hadn't done an all-in for years, and they decided, okay, we've waited long enough for ops, for good ops. Now we do an all-in, and let the all-in decide um, who's going to get wins. So they took us to Nyang. Well, we jumped in. Um, us unbadged guys jumped in first, and then an hour later, the rest of the squadron jumped in, and the whole idea was for them to catch us. We had tasks to do, like recce the police station, recce something else, and the rest of the squadron was trying to find us and hunt us down. And then, yeah, uh, I had actually Graham Peak, that you knew. He was in my little team. There were four of us, and we were supposed to take you to the police station. And I'd been to Nyanga actually before that on a holiday. I knew there was a hotel, Angler's Rest, and I knew more or less how the all-in works. So I packed a few civvies and made certain arrangements. And when we got onto the ground, we jumped. Actually, the jump was very interesting. And had a big effect, I think, on future developments with the fire force, because the height that you jump at is normally 1,000 feet all over the world. The static line, you jump from 1,000 feet. So you've got enough time to look up, check canopy, look around, and get yourself ready for survival. But when we came in, our attack, there was a sort of open space near Nyanga village, and the pilot thought that we'd be dropped further where the ground sort of was sloping downwards. But they dropped us before that, where the ground was only about 300 feet, about 100 meters. I'm just guessing, but it was a hell of a low. Because when I got, you jump out and you look up, check your canopy. As I checked my canopy and I looked down, I was on the ground. I only had time to quickly get my legs together, and then I was on the ground. It was incredible. It was the lowest they'd ever jumped, and we only had, I think, one casualty or two. And the whole thing was because something went wrong. The guy on the ground, I think it was the guy on the ground who had a wrong reading on his altimeter, whatever he used. So that, I think, led to the decision eventually when the fire force started operating. They realized that they don't have to jump from that height because it gives the tourists a chance to shoot at you. They started knocking guys from lower heights. I think that was one of the reasons why they realized they could do it. Well, and then we sort of took off, and an hour later, the rest of the squadron jumped in from normal heights, and Graham, and then I said to them, "Okay, you hide somewhere. I'll do my own thing." So and I had the radio with me, and we were supposed to keep skids with someone who was supposed to be on our side. And I went into a bush and changed into civvies, uh, stuck my Bergen rucksack somewhere, hiding it, and then I went up to Angler's Rest Hotel, and I said, "I'm Mr. Valentine and from South Africa." And, oh yeah, I made a booking before we went. I had made a booking at the hotel. Yeah, and I had a nice time that night, had a nice meal, and with all the old jockeys sitting there, and had a room for myself. And that's how I spent a few days in luxury while the rest of the squad was running around looking for us.
Is that at
And
the Troutbeck Hotel? Or?
no, that's Angler's Rest. That's at the
Angler's
bottom.
Rest, okay.
It's close to Nyanga village. But quite a nice hotel, actually. And at one stage, because I had to keep daily skids. So for the daily skids, I crept out of the hotel and into my bush and sat under the bush and put my radio up and get my skid back to HQ. And I don't know why. I can't imagine they couldn't have picked me up, but it was coincidence. As I was sitting under the bush, suddenly I just heard vehicles screeching to a halt on the road, and these very ass guys running around looking to find whatever they were looking for. And I was sort of hiding under the bush, and they were running past me left and right, and didn't see me, so I got away with it. And
Sure.
the reconnaissance of the police station was easy. I just walked in there and said, "I'm so and so, and I ran out of money. I could make a phone call." And I looked at the alert alert charts, everything they had there. There was a policeman there, and he sort of believed my story. And yeah, so we could do our task. And eventually they realized they can't catch us, so they gave us the order to move to Nyangwe Fort, which was another old fort in the area. And we obviously thought, well, we didn't trust the thing. So we went there. Well, first we got together again. Um, I took my rucksack out and met up with them. And then we walked there quite a distance. And then we didn't walk straight into the fort. We just stayed off to one side. And I had a sort of old pair of overalls. And I had a badza with me. And obviously we had Black is Beautiful and a little floppy hat. And I blackened myself up and sort of walked along the road as some Munt walking along and hoping I'd get away with it, because I thought I was suspicious. I thought they'd probably lay an ambush for us, which was actually the case. And I nearly got away with it. And then, but the problem was I didn't wear my glasses, because it's sort of, if I wear my glasses, it would have been a bit suspicious for the normal want to wear glasses. So I couldn't see the message. So I had to go right up to the port to sort of squint and look in what was going there. That was obviously they were lying there and watching me. And at first they just ignored me, and then they suddenly realized, hang on, this munt has got blue eyes. That doesn't quite fit the picture. So they jumped me and dragged me off to the river and dunked my head under the water and gave me water treatment and all that normal stuff they do when they catch you. And put me up in, they had a campsite at Nyangombe Falls, camping sites, and they had a cage there where they tie you up, and you only got your trousers on and nothing else, and it gets cold in there. Yeah, and then they carry on giving you the treatment, bag over your head and water on the bag and all that sort of nice stuff. And that's how I spent the evening. And then eventually they sort of got tired and they went to sleep, and I was tied to the chair in that cage. And then the cold came along, and it was bloody cold. So that's where you wish daylight will come. And yeah, and that's where I got to know the term false dawn, because I thought, at least daylight's coming. And it wasn't daylight, it was still night. And eventually, one of the guys, I think it was Chris Grayling, he came early in the morning, and the others were still asleep. He crept in and undid my handcuffs. I ran, just ran. And the rest woke up and they ran after me, and I got away. But now I was there barefoot with only a pair of trousers and otherwise nothing on. And I now had to somehow, yeah, find a place where I could get something to wear and survive. And I remember walking along the road, there was an old Austin coming along with a lot of old ladies inside. As soon as they saw me, they accelerated away from me. And eventually I got to a forester's house, knocked on the door, and yeah, and they were actually quite nice to me. I said to them, "We've got an exercise and this and that, and would they like to help me?" I said, "Yeah, come in." They gave me a nice dinner, gave me clothes to wear. They even gave me some money to be able to get a bus fare and so on. And meantime, while I was sort of hiding and they were driving up and down the road and shouting, "The exercise is finished, I must come out," and going back to Salisbury, but I didn't trust them, so I just ignored it. And then after a good night's rest at the forester's house, I went back to Nyangome Falls, crept up to have a look what's going on, and yeah, it was true, they were gone. There was no one left. So I took a bus back to one of these mammy buses back to Salisbury, reported back at the unit, and expecting the OC to say, "No, you failed." And for some reason, I said, "No, congratulations, you passed." And I was now entitled to wear the wings and beret and so on. And at the same time, my leave started. So my parents were staying in Windhoek, and I hiked down to Bide Bridge. And obviously, at that stage, you are so proud of your uniform and everything else that you wear your uniform across the border. Put into Messina, and now I'm standing outside Messina trying to get a lift. Full of myself, part of the elite unit, parachute unit, and wearing my wings and beret, the sand-colored beret, and my blue belt. What comes up is a South African army truck. Stops, and the driver asked me, "Where am I going?" I said, "Yeah, south, anywhere south, going to Joburg, from there to Lincoln." So I said, "Yeah, we'll get you a lift." Jump in at the back, and at the back there were signalers, South African signalers, and they wear a similar beret. Their beret is also a sort of sandy color, and I jumped in the back and sat there amongst them. They made place for me, and one of them said, "Yeah, we couldn't let you stand there on the side of the road. Us signalers have got to stick together." So yeah, it was quite funny. But anyway, that's how I ended up in the unit, and then yeah. But that time, as you said, the initial few months were very funny. We had a lot of ops, but most of the limits. We just flew. Sometimes we flew to Mandava, and then the ops was cancelled. We flew back to Seoul. We flew somewhere else. I think one day we went to 3 different places, and every time it was cancelled again. Went back to Seoul. Yeah, and then eventually things changed, and the unit became more active and productive.
So, Willem, tell us about your first contact, or the one that sticks in your memory the most.
Now, with all those lemons we had, it's difficult to say what was actually my first contacts were in our in Sweet Commander. As I said, we did one bush trip, and that was we went to Mavura Donna. We had a camp there, and then we walked across into Mozambique looking for camps. And then eventually they said, no, they found a camp. Someone found a camp, and we attacked the camp. we got dropped off and we swept through, and there were contacts there. And yeah, it was, how can I say, it was, everyone goes through the same sort of emotions when you get shot at. But fortunately, it was, there wasn't too much opposition as I can remember. Uh, and then we had to walk out with prisoners to back to the border, and they were picked up. It was one of these typical camps they had initially close to the border. You know, there was a little stream for water and parade ground, etc. And it's something everyone goes through. What I remember is not so much the contact, but when we walked back, at some stage they are looking for a place to sleep, and there was a footpath that they're following, and we went off the footpath. We had civvies. There were civvies in the camp as well, and they took them with to Rhodesia, and they went to keep. But there was a little pickaninny, and I think it was Pudding, who put him on his shoulder, and he couldn't walk properly, and he put him on his shoulder, and he put him back. So it was a funny introduction to the normal picture of what war is like. You know, there's two sides to it.
In the squadron, were you in A troop or B troop or?
I was in B troop. Uh, Eventually, it became C squadron, and yeah, as I said, initially there was a lot of activity, but very few contacts, and then eventually that changed. And I think by the time Chimoyo came along, we had a lot more experience, and I think the total unit at that stage, the total number was just over 100. RLI was also involved. Um, yeah, it was actually, but you probably had other guys talking about Chimoyo. It's not. The thing started, they pulled us all in. I mean, they were really scratching the bottom because the bottom of the barrel. Because as I said, the total number of that we had was just over 100, and they got everyone that they could lay their hands on, and we were confined to barracks, no phoning out, and so on. So we knew something big was coming up, and we'd moved to Kabrit by that stage. We left Cranbourne barracks, and we were now at Kabrit, close to the airport, and yeah, and then eventually we were taken over to the Air Force Base, to the big hangar where the parachute training was normally took place. They had laid out a model on the inside the hangar. We were all sitting around it and watching, and there were all the high brass and intelligence guys and so on. So everyone knew it was the biggest op we'd done so far. And yeah, and then they explained Chimoyo, supposed to be thousands of turns. Um, Close by, there were supposed to be Cubans or whatever with tanks, so on that could come and help. So obviously, to use the expression, you shit yourself. And then they gave the briefing on Chimoyo, and then they said, okay, we have a break. And came back after the break. They had another model of Temwe, which was 200 kilometers in or the other side of Kabora Bassa Lake, for the second stage to attack Temwe, as if Chimoyo wasn't enough. Chimoyo, I think, was about 60 k's in. This Temwe was even further in. And they gave us a briefing to attack that, and that was also supposed to hold thousands of tourists and so on. So I remember that night we slept at the Air Force Base. We didn't go back to the barracks. We had to sleep there, and one of the guys, typical army unit, and one said to the other one, I'm shitting myself. And I thought to myself, yeah, you're not the only one. Yeah, and the next day, early morning, as all the RLI guys know as well, the decks started up, and the total number, I think we had the 6 decks, and they were all full, and they took off. And each deck was about 20 4 guys in it. In our case, 6 4-man teams. And and then I think around about 7 o'clock we jumped in, and they placed us as top lines initially around the camp. And obviously they couldn't cover the whole camp. Um, I think there were choppers involved as well, drop troops by chopper on the other side. And then they sent in the bombers and the hunters, gamblers and hunters to bomb the place. And we just kept the stopper group. We just lay there and had to shoot anyone that tried to get away. And eventually, after hours, they sort of said to us, okay, well, it felt like hours. They said to us, okay, you're now going to move forward. So we formed the line and moved forward. And what I forgot to tell you was before we actually, while we were still at the preparation stage, the Brits, we went to the range. And because they'd actually cut a recruit's course short, which was nearly finished, but not quite finished. And they got them involved as well. And every team of 4 got one new guy, one of these guys who hadn't quite finished their training, but they were considered good enough to be part of the op because we needed everyone we could get. And the guy they gave me was a guy called Doug Tapson from, I think it was from Shamrock, a farmer's son. Stronger. And Sergeant Major Mason said to me, okay, he's part of your team. And I immediately made him machine gunner because, the strongest guy carries a machine gun normally. And but we had the RPD. We didn't use the mag at that stage because the RPD is lighter and it uses the same ammo as the AK. It was I like that RPD anyway. What I didn't know is that he'd never seen the RPD before. He hadn't finished his training yet, and he was totally unfamiliar with the weapon. And he missed the target when he was shooting our weapons in, and had him shoot again, missed the target. And the Sergeant Major came to me, listen, I'm going to give you another guy. This guy's useless. And for some reason, I decided, no, I want to find out what's the problem. And I squatted behind him and I looked at his aiming picture and realized that he'd had it completely wrong. I can't remember the detail, but he had it completely wrong. And I sort of told him what to do, and then he shot. And then he was like a typical farmer's son. He was hit on target and problem solved. So I nearly lost him, but he stayed in my team. And then we did the jump, as I said, and we got up eventually and formed a line and moved towards the target. And as you mentioned, at some stage, no, before that, we were still moving through the trees. It was sort of open underneath. And suddenly Doug was walking next to me with the RPD, and suddenly he opened up. And I hadn't seen anything. It was because there was so much noise and the shooting was going on, the gunships was in the air, and there's so much noise. I never realized that someone was shooting at me. And Doug had seen him, and he killed the guy behind the tree. And when I shot on him, I said, "What are you doing?" Just blasting off like that. He said, "No, didn't you see there was this guy shooting at you?" I said, "Oh, okay, thanks." So it saved my life the first time. And and then we carried on, and then we got to this. Wasn't really, in our case, wasn't a trench line. It was more like a little stream and thick bush in front of us. And from there, they fired at us. It was quite a heavy fire. France now got killed, and I got shot in both legs. Funny, that was you wonder beforehand what it's like to get shot, but it was like a big smack, as if you get smacked hard. No pain really initially, not initially. And I went down, and my medic went and tried to sort me out, but we were stuck. I mean, we couldn't lift our heads. It was such a lot of fire coming our way, and he couldn't even put up a drip. As soon as he put the drip up, he had to take it down again. Eventually, he shoved the drip under my body, so he had some pressure, and sorted my legs. I think another medic came. I think Alan Hyder was the one who eventually came over and helped out because I couldn't find my veins initially, and then. They had to get me back. to the back where there was a LZ or a chopper to pick me up. But they couldn't. I mean, they brought another team in there. There's some sort of stretcher there and told me on the stretcher. As soon as they picked the stretcher up, they had to put me down again because there was just too much fire going on. And Doug was lying there behind his machine gun and he was watching this. And it carried on. And they tried again. They couldn't get me out. Eventually, he came over. I was lying there. So what's going on now? So he just grabbed me, threw me over his shoulders, and started running. Bullets flying left and right, and he legs dangling one side, my head flopping the side, and he just ran to the back and got to the LZ, threw me down there, and just disappeared. I didn't even have time to think. Yeah, that was my Chimoyo at an end. So I missed the rest of the op. Obviously, threw me back to Lekker because Alexander from there to Grand Relief, and then back to Salisbury to hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just heard about the other ops. Yeah, but you know, John, as you get older, you think about things, and you sort of, I mean, we all know how it ended, and we had different areas that we went to a lot, like the Russian front in the south, the southeast.
Yeah.
And we did quite a few ops there. A lot of things happened there, some of them funny and some of them not so funny. And then we eventually did quite a few ops in Zambia. Farmer's house to try and take him out after he murdered those guys from the passenger line. And other ops into Zambia. You know, the big danger to us was the east. I mean, that's where most of the terrorists were coming in, and that's where that was our biggest problem. It was the longest border, and it was a border easy to cross, even though the minefields, they might have helped, but in the end, you know, I remember once we patrolled along the fence, the minefield fence, and yeah, every now and again you come across a place where they just made a hole in the fence, and then they started digging on one side and sort of carefully put the ground, you know, probably use shovels and put the ground next to like a ditch, and they dug a ditch across the minefield by digging from underneath. And any AP mines that way they could lift them up. That was one way of doing it. The other way was getting trees to fall over it, so the tree would set off the AP mines and they walked on the tree. So the minefield wasn't really, it wasn't an obstacle, but it wasn't something that kept them out. You know, if you don't, a minefield only works 100% if you can cover it by fire, and we just didn't have the manpower to watch that minefield all the way. So our big problem was the eastern border, and I think we didn't. The Zambian ops were nice and good, and there are also terrorists that are, but we should have actually left the Zambezi, because there's only two crossing points. They always told us, yeah, they got this conventional force, Cipro got this conventional force, and they're big danger to us. And obviously, we looked for revenge against Nkama. That's why we did this op into Lusaka. But we should have concentrated more on Mozambique, and especially RENAMO. I mean, there we had a potential that was it was utilized in the end, but too late and too little. You know, when you speak to Del, what he was actually actively involved. I was never involved with RENAMO while I was in Rhodesia. I only got involved with RENAMO afterwards when I was in South Africa, the South African Army. I got involved in the training of RENAMO, and we actually jumped in from South Africa into Goroza. And we walked around with them for about 6 weeks, and they totally dominated that area. And Steve Hewitt, a friend of mine who was in this unit, he went on one op in 79, I think it must have been. At the end, we sort of started utilizing that potential. But as I said, it was too little too late. We should have concentrated and thrown everything in. As far as I'm concerned, we should have thrown the SAS and ROI and Zulu Scouts, concentrate in Mozambique to effect regime change, you know, to get the government to change the government in Mozambique. That should have been our aim. And instead, we just put it along the border and with this and with that, as I said, only at the later stage. There's the potential that RENAMO had. Because the people in Mozambique were fed up with that's why RENAMO started. You know, the narrative they got that Rhodesia established RENAMO. Now, that is not true. RENAMO grew out of itself. You know, Andre Matangaiza was a Frelimo guy. And then when the war was over against the Portuguese, he started, he became a civvy and got one. That's the story I heard from Cisco, that he got involved in transport and got one truck and then eventually another truck. And then Frelimo came, you know, typical Marxist ideology, and they said, no, everything belongs to the state. You can keep one truck, you're the driver. And other things that happened, like the re-education camps and so on. And eventually, RENAMO grew inside Mozambique, and Andre Matangaiza came over the border into Rhodesia, and he tried to make contact and get Rhodesia to help because he was clever enough to realize that his aim was our aim, you know, to defeat Frelimo. And initially, apparently, he was thrown into jail. You know, we didn't trust him and threw him into jail. And only afterwards, someone in Special Branch realized the potential, and then they supported him and got the base in Udzi. Eventually, they had, I think, 200 trains. Oh, yeah, that's another thing that Andre said. Andre said to the Rhodesians, listen, there are so many people that want to fight Frelimo. Every weapon you give me, I'll have a guy inside Mozambique fighting against Frelimo, which was true. And eventually, very late in the war, they then walked from the border to Gorongosa and established themselves and controlled their area. And the locals supported them, to the extent that even afterwards, they put up a monument to it, you know, in Beira. Yeah, anyway, that's just my opinion. I think we should have done far more in Mozambique with RENAMO and gone for regime change instead of just putting along the border.
As a kid, I remember we used to go from Umtali down to Beira for our school holidays, and on the way we used to pop in at Gorongosa to the game reserve there, you know. So I actually been to Gorongosa many times, and it was a fantastic game reserve. But I remember that road well. And sorry, Willem, going back to when you were shot in the legs, whereabouts? Was it through your thighs or through your calves or?
No, I was lucky. It didn't hit the femur. It was my right top or my rear leg and bottom left leg. And as I said, it didn't hit the main artery and so on. It just went in and out. And they fixed me up and they patched me up and spent a few days in hospital. And then they sent me to training troop. They sent me to training troop for a while, which was also very interesting. I think I spent a few weeks at Guai River to help with the training. I was basically an assistant instructor then for a while. And the main man, like Dr. Masson, Dick Bakenbach, those guys. They had a very good system. I was quite amazed. I mean, as I said, I did my training at ROI. Meantime, SAS did their own training. They did the basics in Salisbury, and then for advanced training, they took me to Guai River, which was an old mine complex, and with a few houses and a club with a swimming pool and so on. It was a very nice place. In the middle of nowhere, and yeah, there you could do whatever you wanted to. You could lay ambushes, use light ammo, really simulate battle conditions. It was actually ideal for training. And yeah, I quite enjoyed myself for it. And then when we were finished with that phase, I went with them to Matokos for the selection. But by that time, they'd introduced the pre-rev, which was I'd never done it. I mean, when you and me, when we went over, it was a selection. That was it. Few days
Yeah.
walking from A to B and the speed march, etc. And that's where you got judged on. But meantime, they'd decided that before you actually do the selection itself, you've got to do a pre-rev for 36 hours without any rest. They bugger you. Basically, they bugger you around. 1 hour is physical, 1 hour not so physical to give your body a rest, but still, like for example, have you run around for 1 hour and then get you into the hangar and give you some sort of stupid little puzzle, like you're in a balloon and you got Hitler and Churchill with you and who are you going to throw out first? No, silly stuff like that, just to keep you busy, prevent you from going to sleep, and that's how you carry on for 36 hours. And the course I was helping with, when we went to Willem, it was in the middle of winter, it was very cold at night. And as I said, I was more like an observer and didn't really know what to expect. And on the one hand, I laughed. On the other hand, I thought to myself, yes, I'm glad I didn't have to go through this. For example, in the middle of the night, they take them to the swimming pool, and it's 12 o'clock midnight, and they have them line up and tell them, okay, take your clothes off and get into the swimming pool. And it's freezing. And when they get into the swimming pool, and they mustn't move around too much to let the cold really get to you. And then they have them walk from one end to the other and get them really cold and really freezing. And then eventually they tell them, okay, you got say 5 minutes or some ridiculous time, because by that time your whole body is freezing. Your fingers, you can't really, you struggle to open your hand, and your fingers move your fingers, and they said to you, okay, 5 minutes, you've got to be dressed. Obviously, no one will be finished dressing in 5 minutes, not in that condition. So they do their best, and no one succeeds. No one is ready, and they tell them, okay, you guys are bugging us around. Back into the swimming pool for another hour. And the whole idea of selection is they don't throw you off. You've got to throw yourself off. They want to see how determined you are to stay.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is to get them to give up. And at that very moment, when they said you've got to go back for another hour into that freezing swimming pool, 3 guys put up their hands and said, so they said, well done, you 3 guys. Go to the kitchen. There's coffee waiting for you. There's a steak waiting for you, steak and eggs. You can rest and have a good sleep. Well done, you guys. Here you go. And the 3 were sort of taken off to one side. Now they are sort of slowly getting dressed and so on. They've now given up. And the others, for whatever reason, they haven't given up yet. So they said, anyone else? Come on, guys. It's why let yourself be buggered around? Come on. And no one, really. They make sure that no one else wants to go. And then when they sort of start moving towards the swimming pool, they said, okay, stop. Now these other 3 guys are still standing there getting dressed. Tell the others, okay, stop. Okay, you've got 20 minutes. Take your time, get dressed, see you in the hangar in half an hour. Yeah. And when you look at these 3 guys, the expression on their faces, it's quite something to watch that system at work, the selection system at work. Yeah, and then after that they go to Matopos. By that time we'd switched from Nyanga to Matopos because Nyanga was becoming too dangerous. And then same principle, 5 days, and and I sort of walked along. The holes in my legs were sort of healing slowly, and I could walk around and watch things. And quite interesting. We had a guy called Chris Sanford. He was a national serviceman, and he was the best runner we had. Really fit guy. And up Rhodesia, I think was it called. The speed march was up that mountain. He ran up there. I couldn't believe it. They had a full pack on a rifle, and I had no pack. I just had my wedding and rifle with me, and I couldn't keep up with him. They just ran up there, and as I said, you don't really throw guys off. You put so much pressure on him to see uh, whether he reaches the point where he gives up. And
Yeah.
they all know that. Everyone knows it. And Sanford was one of the guys who really did very well. But obviously, somewhere along the road, he makes a mistake here or a mistake there, and so on. But eventually, the last day arrived where they got to reach Matapas, where Cecil Rhodes is buried. That what do you call
Yes.
it, Matapas. And they got there, and then they went to sleep. And the instructors go off to their house and have a nice dinner. Then 11 o'clock, I realized something's coming because they had that look in their faces where they're anticipating something. And they jumped into the truck and they drove off to take us back to the place where the guys were sleeping and kicked them awake and said to them, "Come on, guys, you've got to do another leg. You've got to start now. This is now in the middle of the night." And by that time, anyone who's still on selection is like a zombie. Okay? You can tell him to walk to the moon and he pack his stuff and walk to the moon. And they're like zombies. And everyone gets his kit ready and they sort of slowly get together. And Chris Sanford, as usual, he's the first one to get ready and start walking down the road. They tell them to go to Malini Dam. And, but we all jumped into the truck and we went down the road for some distance and then we stopped on the side of the road. And the instructors now and they waiting for the first guy to come in. Obviously, that was Chris Sanford. He's coming down the road. It's dark. And we're standing on the side of the road. Rob Johnson, he was the training officer. He's got a torch with him. As Chris Sanford came up to us, he sort of stopped him and said to him, "Sanford, yes, sir." And he put the torch on his face. And all the other instructors, like a bunch of hyenas, hanging around and waiting for something. And then he started telling Sanford how useless he was and told him he did wrong and he was late and so on. And all the things that he could say against him. And then in the end, he said to him, "Okay, we've decided we don't want you. So, get on the truck. You're off the your RTU back to you." And he obviously knows, it goes against the whole principle. He hasn't given up. And in fact, he's done very well. Now he can't understand that. And he starts arguing. So he said, "Shut up." Arguing, get on the truck. And eventually Sanford realized it doesn't help arguing. So doesn't understand it, but okay, what can he do? And he starts turning around. As he starts turning around, Johnson sticks out his hand and says, "Congratulations, Sanford, you passed." At that moment, he started crying. "Whoa!" And that's what everyone's been waiting for. That shock to the system, when he suddenly realizes that he passed. Normal guy just burst into tears. The instructors are all giggling. That's what they've been waiting for. Yeah, there was a lot of humor. It was a system. Rob Johnson as a training officer and Sergeant Major Masson as his senior NCO. I think they ran a very, very good training program. It was excellent. Anyway, that was my time in training troop, and then eventually we did ops again. And as I said, we worked on the Russian front a lot, which was quite a story.
Just out of interest, I wanted to ask you, did you ever meet a medic by the name of Andy Johnston?
Yeah, Andy was our medic. Well, he was a medic in our unit. And I can't remember exactly where we worked together, but I knew him and we worked together at some stage.
I never got the opportunity to interview Andy. I know he also joined the South African Army and got the Honoris Crux while he was in the South African Army. I tried to ask him what he did to get that, but he made some joke about, I don't know, cleaning the toilets or something.
I met him I got to know him quite well. He was in Cape Town before he died.
Yeah.
And this is amazing. I never knew that he got the Honoris Crux. That's what a modest guy he was. I didn't even know it. He never mentioned it. And for some reason, I didn't know it. But he must have done something good.
Yeah, no, Andy, it's funny. It was a funny, it was during the whole COVID thing. And that month, I think we lost three guys. We lost Vernon Prinsloo. We lost the chopper pilot. What was his name?
Not Dick Paxton. Wasn't Dick
Dick
Paxton?
Paxton. Yeah, Dick Paxton.
Wasn't Dick Paxton.
And Vernon and Dick both had died of congestive heart failure, which was probably caused by the bloody vaccine. But anyway, I also that same month I had a congestive heart failure as well and nearly died. Um, but Dick and Vernon didn't make it. Andy Johnston also died that same month. It was a bad month in Cape Town. Yeah, it's funny, going back to the SAS selection. We also had when I did my selection course with Graham Peak, we had a little bit of a pre-rev, only lasted one night, but they sent us across the wire to the RLI swimming pool. And we had to play water polo for hours. And the RLI pool is quite deep, so you can't actually tread on the bottom. you have to you have to keep afloat the whole time. And so by the next morning, we went off to Nyanga. We managed to try and get a bit of sleep on the way to Nyanga from Salisbury, and they dropped us off on the side of the road and split us up into teams of four. But each team of four had three big logs like this,
I know.
and we had to carry them from the side of the road over into the Gomos and our RV was supposed to be at 5 o'clock that afternoon at Inyangombe Falls.
Yeah, that's normal. That's the first day.
Yeah, yeah. And
then you
and
do buddy
so
rating. And then you do buddy rating because they want to find out how you operate as a team. If you do your bit, you do
yeah,
buddy.
yeah.
I don't know if you remember. You get asked who do you want to work with? Because after
Yes.
that day, having to sort of take turns carrying the log, who's going to
Actually, I don't think
do
it
his
was
bit.
three logs. I can't remember how many logs it was, but I just remember it was uneven. So there was the spare guy was a chap who I don't think he was ever badged SAS, but eventually he got a dishonorable discharge. He ended up as paymaster at SAS. Ray Despevel was his name. But anyway, ended up Ray Despevel carried all of our weapons, and the rest of us carried the logs. And we found our map reading was off because in the Gomos there the magnetic north was there was the magnetic north was all over the place in the Gomos. It was pull your compass off. So and you're throwing this log down a cliff, and you've got to find a way to climb down, and then find a way to climb up and take the log up the other side. And oh my word, we never made it. By the time it got dark, we still hadn't found Inyangombe Falls. And then when we all settled down to sleep in the rain, it started raining. Raiders Bevel said he was supposed to have four rifles, and he only had three. So somewhere along the line, he lost an FN. So nobody knew what to do. So in the end, I said, "Oh fuck it, I don't want to fail this selection. I'm going to go back and look for that FN." How I managed to find it, I have no idea. But it was one of the places where we'd rested. There was an FN, and I managed to find it, and I managed to find my way back in the dark and in the rain to where these guys were sleeping. It was only 10 o'clock the next morning that we arrived at the RV, and Daryl Watt was waiting for us, wrote down our names, interrogated us to say how are these other guys? Who's a whinger? Who's pulling their weight? So he asked us our opinion of the guys we were with, and then he gave me because we were unshaven and our weapons were dirty because it slept in the rain all night and everything. He gave me a rock, which I had to put in my pack, and he signed his name on the rock with a Koki pen. But for the next leg, we were on our own, and then we had to go from Inyangombe Falls to World's View.
World's View.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was another. Again, I didn't make it to World's View in time. So I ended up sleeping in someone's garden. You know, there's all those cottages on the way up to World's View. I slept in someone's garden on the lawn, and there was a bloody leopard coughing and circling me all night. And I thought, if I don't sleep, I'm going to die of tiredness. If I do sleep, the leopard's going to kill me. So either way, I'm just going to go to sleep. So I went to sleep, and the leopard didn't touch me. And the next morning, I managed to make it to the RV. But again, Darrell Watt found a grain of sand or something in my weapon, gave me another rock, signed his name on it. And then we had to walk to the bottom of Mount Inyangombe, and it was raining the whole. I don't know, and that bush is very thick. You know, the bracken. You're not allowed to walk on the road. And I thought, you know, it just makes no sense walking through the bush when I could walk on the road. So I walked on the road, and I thought, I'll use my best anti-tracking skills or whatever. And so the next morning, eventually I fell asleep at the foot of Mount Inyangombe underneath a log because it was still raining the whole time, and I was cold and I was wet. I was hungry. And the next morning, Darrell Watt calls me and says, Van Sale. I said, yes, Sarge. He says, I see you were walking on the road, you know. Here's another rock. So now I've got three big rocks, all signed by Darrell Watt, you know. And then it was the speed march where you have to go from the bottom of Inyangombe to the top down, and then along the Pungwe River, the Pungwe Road, you know, to Causeway Cottages.
Pungwe Cottages, yeah.
Causeway Cottages, yeah. And
did you make it in time?
I tell you what, I halfway up in Inyangombe, I gave up. I thought, no, fuck it, I can't take this anymore because I had cramp in my legs. I was cold, I was miserable, and I brewed myself up some tea. But, you know, after drinking the tea and the sugar and resting for 10 minutes, I thought, no, I'm going to carry on. By now, I was coming completely lost. At the top, there's a guy waiting there to take your name at the top, you know. So he says, I see you've given up because you're way behind everyone else. So I said, no, I'm going to carry on. He said, no, down at the bottom of the hill, there's a Jeep, a Land Rover. You can, you know, just go. You can have a hot shower and you can have breakfast and have a cold beer or whatever. Anyway, at the bottom of the thing, the guy also said, come on, just hop in the back of the vehicle and we'll take you to the campsite. But I said, no, I'll carry on. And I started jogging because I realized I was not going to make it. You only had 6 hours, I think, from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. I started jogging, and I was singing some mindless tune in my brain. And I actually think I went like into a trance, you know, because the next thing I knew, I fell, and on the road, I tripped and I fell and I grazed the side of my face, and I looked up and I'd passed everyone, and I was coming first, and Causeway Cottages was about 100 meters in front of me, and while I was walking to Causeway Cottages, some other guy passed me and I came second. But yeah, and then after that it was Inyanga Gardens, and then from Inyanga Gardens to Inyangombe campsite, and that was our. And then I had to show Darrell what all my rocks, and he counted them, you know. And then we weren't allowed to talk to the guys who'd failed the selection or given up. They were separated like, you know, the sheep and the goats. And Garth Barrett piled us into his vehicle, and still as filthy and wet and dirty as we were, we went to, he drove us to Troutbeck Hotel, and we had a slap-up meal there. You know, we had to leave all our rifles at the front desk, and all these other guests were dressed up for dinner, and you had these bloody filthy Rhodesian soldiers. But we had steak and we had champagne, and it was like a dream. It was actually like a dream, you know. You know, the waiters with their white gloves on, and they after a week of hell, you know. Yeah, memories, eh? Willem, thank you so much, my brother. I've really, really enjoyed meeting you and chatting to you, and would love to have another session with you if possible, and hear some more of your stories.
Yeah, I'm always in two minds with this sort of thing. As I said, someone watching it sees this old bugger, flapping his gums about, sort of that. Equal, there's a word for it. There's a discrepancy between the two. You sort of.
Well, I'll tell you
But
what,
anyway,
you are 8 years older than me. I was born in 1956. I think you were born in 48, right? Is that? And you look 10 years younger than me, I'll tell you now.
yeah, but we all get old. We all get wrinkled, and yeah. But you know what, John? Off the topic, as far as age is concerned, we should be thankful as long as you can walk and you got your ducks more or less in a row still. So many
Yeah,
guys who are either
yeah,
dead or they are more in hospital than out of hospital, and we can really
absolutely.
be. It's a blessing to be able to still walk and
Yeah,
and be
amen, bro.
more or less normal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I asked Rob, what is this all about? So he told me that he's done 7 hours of chats.
yeah,
I said,
yeah.
well, there's nothing left then for me to talk about. I mean, we covered everything.
You know, I don't think so. I think everyone has a story to tell. I mean, if you had to ask Graham Peake about his selection, it was the exact same selection I was on. He'd probably have a completely different story, to tell about
He
his
died, you know
selection.
that, huh? You know he
Yeah,
died.
he died prematurely, I think, of Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
Wasn't
he
he?
was, it was,
Wasn't he in the Pathfinders? Eh?
yeah,
South African
he
Pathfinders.
did very well in the South African army. And then I found it so nice, every reunion, every get together that we had in South Africa and Pretoria, he attended, and proud of his medals and proud of his veteran status. And, then at one stage, one guy came up to me and said, "Who's this bloody so and so?" I said, they even doubted, because at that stage he'd already had the early stages of Alzheimer's. He was repeating
Yes.
himself, and you could see something is going wrong. And they sort of looked down on him. I said, "No, wait, this guy is 100% genuine. He's really, he is allowed. He can wear his medals, and he's entitled to them. He's entitled
Yeah.
to be a Yeah, it was tragic to see him go down like that.
But anyway, Willem, I've taken up too much of your time. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
I'll
And
be in touch.
you must.
Okay.
Where do you stay as a man of interest? Where do you stay?
I live in the Philippines now. I was
Oh,
living in Gordons Bay for many years, which is why I made friends with Andy Johnston and Dick Paxton. But but I live in Southeast Asia. Yeah, yeah. So
and
I've
what's
got
it
a.
like?
It's 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 like paradise, yeah, bro. It's like paradise. I live on a little island in the most luxurious, lush jungle up in the mountains. I'm about 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away from the sea. The sea is crystal clear, turquoise blue water. And it's so lush and I don't know. The sunsets and the sunrises it rains every night. There's no seasons like winter or spring or summer or autumn. Every day is the same. It's 30 degrees, the temperature.
And
It,
you don't need you become a citizen, or do you need a visa, or what is there any
I'm
restrictions
on a
on you?
I'm on a tourist visa and I have to renew my visa every 2 months. But you can renew it every 2 months for 3 years. Then you have to leave the country. So I've been here for 3 years, and then left, went to South Africa for a month, and then I came back, and I'm on my second 3-year cycle now.
And are you on your own, or you got your family with you?
Now I'm living alone in a beautiful little apartment. Everything here is everything is about one third of what it costs to live in South Africa.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that I can believe.
so if you're paying 6,000 rand a month rent in South Africa, for the same place you pay 2,000 rand a month. Yeah, and everything's like that. So I I live like a king here on very little money. I have a girlfriend who I see on weekends, and she's not half my age, but she's 30 years younger than me. But Filipinos, their culture is. We've been together for years now, but their culture is. They treat their man like a king. If I go and have a shower, I don't have to wash my own hair. She will come and wash my hair, dry me with a
The
towel.
little bit you got left.
Yeah, put the toothpaste on the brush for me, and I don't lift a finger when she's here. Um, it's a completely different culture where the they really respect the elderly for some reason. So a young girl to marry an older guy is like a hunter finding a big old elephant with massive tusks. For them it's weird, and totally different to Western women. And the nice thing about the Philippines, the official language is English, and 95% of Filipinos are Christians.
Yeah, so
So
they're Catholic mostly. Yeah.
the Catholic Church is very strong here, and so I find the fact that all the signs are in English and everyone speaks a bit of English, uh, and I've picked up the local language to some degree. So you can talk with anybody, and the people are very friendly. There's absolutely no crime here whatsoever.
That's nice.
If I buy groceries, I leave them on my motorbike out in the open, and I go into another shopping center or something. I come back and all my groceries are still there.
Yeah, that's what I hate about South Africa. The whole that you got to look over your shoulder all the time. That you can't walk. I
Yeah,
mean, you can't literally. You cannot walk on your own in Pretoria or Joburg or even Cape Town. Sooner or later you'll have them checking you out, and you'll run into some gang, and it's
yeah,
so tiresome. I must say we are in Germany. The part I'm in is very similar. We still touch wood. I mean, they're doing their best to stuff it up. They're doing their best to stuff it up. They're bringing in all
yeah,
these millions of others, and they're really changing the country. But so far, the area we are in, also we got no electrical fence. We got no big walls. The gates open most of the time, and
yeah,
we've been there for 8 years, and I've never had anyone come into the yard without
yeah,
permission. Nice. Anyway,
yeah,
no,
no,
I can
yeah.
understand that. But have you? Sorry, have you got kids? Yeah, so
So
you're living a fulfilled life.
yeah, I don't have as much contact with my kids as I would like. But I do pray for them every day, and I think about them, and we maybe talk 3 times a year, Christmas and Easter and for my birthday or something. But I'd like to talk to them every week at least, but video. But no, I'm very happy here, Willem. There's
You
a
also got a Rhodesian wife? You got a Rhodesian wife, or is it South African?
yeah,
Your wife.
yeah, my son's mother is an ex-roadie. Yeah, we met in Salisbury, and we both got married at the age of 19.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
While
we
you were
were
still in
young.
the army. While you were
Huh?
still in the army. While you were
What?
still in the army.
No, I'd left the army by then. Yeah, and we were married for 13 years, and during those 13 years, we had 2 kids. And then unfortunately, I I became a stockbroker, and I made a lot of money as a stockbroker, and I don't know, I succumbed to the temptations of the world, and I lost my way, I think, a little bit for many years, and it was only really much later that I gave up stockbroking, and I became a martial arts teacher, and then I kind of found myself again. And so for about 20 years, I taught martial arts in Cape Town. Ended up with quite a successful martial arts business. Used to go to Japan every year to train, and that's where I fell in love with the Far East, or the Southeast Asia anyway. And then I was living in Bali in Indonesia when the pandemic happened. And then they kicked us all out, and I ended up in Gordons Bay for the lockdown. And the first place to open up after the lockdown was the Philippines. I'd never been here before, and as soon as I arrived in the Philippines, I thought, "Wow, I should have come here 20 years ago." Yeah, it's a wonderful country. I'm very, very, very happy here. Every morning I wake up and I'm grateful. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. No, John, it was nice meeting you. Thank you.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Willem. Yeah.